The cowboy caught the older woman's wrist just as she dropped another handful of dark berries into her basket. The woven handle rested against her arm without shaking. She did not flinch. She did not pull away. She simply looked at him while the afternoon wind moved through the fence behind them. "You crossed my fence. I know. This is private land." "I know that too. Then leave." She lowered her eyes to his hand wrapped around her wrist. "You can let go now." He loosened his grip without thinking. She rubbed her wrist once, then reached toward another bush as if nothing had happened. "I said leave." She picked another berry. "No." His jaw tightened. "You deaf?" "No." "You trying to start trouble?" "No." "Then what are you doing here?" She placed the berry into her basket before answering. "Taking what has always been mine." He laughed once, sharp and empty. "These berries belong to this ranch." Her eyes lifted to his. "These berries belonged to my mother before your family stole this land." The words landed harder than any shout. He stared at her face. There was no hate there, no fear, only certainty. "My family bought every acre." "So you were told." "My father has the papers." "Paper remembers ink." She glanced toward the ground. "The soil remembers blood." Silence spread between them. He searched her face for a joke, but found none. "You're trespassing." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "It became true after someone decided my family no longer mattered." His voice grew colder. "I've never seen you before." "I've seen you." "When?" "When you were too young to remember." He frowned. "I don't know you." "You knew this valley before fences." He shook his head. "I grew up here." "You grew up inside a story someone else wrote." She lifted her basket and stepped around him. He blocked her path again. "You're not leaving until you explain yourself." "I already did." "No. You made accusations." "I gave you history." "My father never stole anything." Her eyes drifted beyond the berry bushes toward a line of old trees. "You should ask the trees." He followed her gaze. "There is nothing out there." "There used to be." She pointed toward a place where thick branches swallowed the sunlight. "Walk through those woods." "Why?" "You'll find an old well." "I know about the well." "No." She slowly shook her head. "You know where it is." "You don't know why everyone stopped speaking about it." A cold feeling settled inside him. "The well dried up years ago." "So people say." "What are you trying to prove?" "The ground remembers everything." He folded his arms. "Ground doesn't remember. It remembers footsteps." She tapped her boot against the dirt. "It remembers tears." Another tap. "It remembers names buried without stones." The breeze stopped. Even the birds had fallen quiet. He looked toward the trees again. The hidden path suddenly seemed darker than before. "What happened there?" She did not answer immediately. Instead, she bent down, picked one last berry, and rolled it gently between her fingers. "When I was a little girl, mothers came here every summer." She looked at the berry. They laughed. Her voice became softer. "They filled baskets." She closed her hand around it. "Then one season they stopped coming." "Why?" "You already know who can answer that." "My father?" She nodded once. "No," he almost smiled. "My father doesn't hide things, doesn't he? He tells me everything." She looked straight into his eyes until he felt strangely exposed. "No father tells his son everything." He swallowed. "What happened to the women?" She stepped around him again. This time he did not stop her. She walked toward the broken fence where she had entered the pasture. Just before crossing through, she looked back one final time. "Ask your father why no woman in this valley gathers berries anymore." Then she disappeared beyond the trees. The cowboy remained frozen among the bushes. The basket she had carried seemed heavier than any sack of grain. He looked toward the abandoned path. He looked toward the distant ranch house. Questions crowded his mind faster than answers. At last he turned away from the berry field and started walking home. Each step felt slower than the last. Behind him the wind returned. Somewhere beyond the trees, where the forgotten well waited beneath tangled branches, something unseen seemed to be listening. The cowboy pushed open the front door just before sunset. The old house smelled of wood smoke and worn leather. His father sat beside the cold fireplace, cleaning a saddle with slow hands. He looked up only once. "You took your time." "I met someone." His father shrugged. "Folks wander onto ranches." She wasn't wandering. The old man kept rubbing the leather. Who was she? An older woman, so? She was picking berries. His father's hand stopped. Inside our pasture. Did you send her away? I tried. His father looked at him, and she said the berries belonged to her mother before our family stole this land. The cloth slipped from the old man's fingers. Silence filled the room. His face lost all color. What else did she say? She pointed at the old well. The old man stood so quickly the chair scraped across the floor. What did she tell you? She said the ground remembers everything. His father turned away. Forget her. I can't. You will. Why? Because I'm telling you. Who is she? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. His father slammed his hand onto the table. Never speak to that woman again. Why not? Because nothing good comes from listening to her. What is she hiding? His father's voice became quiet. No. What do you mean? She's not hiding anything. Then who is? The old man stared toward the dark window. Some doors stay closed for a reason. I'm asking a simple question, and I'm giving you a simple answer. You didn't answer anything. His father walked past. Him. If you value this family, stay away from her. The cowboy watched him disappear into the back room. Sleep never came that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman's calm face and the forgotten path leading toward the old well. Before sunrise, he saddled his horse and rode back to the berry patch. Morning. Mist rested across the field. The woman already stood beside the bushes. She did not look. Surprised. I knew you'd come. How? You have your mother's eyes. He frowned. You never met my mother? I knew enough. My father told me to stay away. And yet you're here. I need answers. You need truth. They're the same thing. She smiled sadly. Not always. He stepped closer. My father was afraid. I know. I've never seen him like that. You spoke words, buried for many years. What happened here? She looked toward the distant hills. Tell me something first. What? Have you ever heard the name Clara Ashe? He searched his memory. No. Ask anyone over 60. Who was she? A young woman. What happened to her? She asked dangerous questions. Like what? Who owned the valley before fences? And? Who disappeared after speaking? His stomach tightened. She vanished? One autumn evening. No body. No funeral. No witnesses. Only silence. People don't simply disappear. They do when powerful families decide they should. Shook his head. My family wouldn't. She interrupted him. I didn't say your family. You meant them. I meant everyone who benefited. He looked toward the road. Why has nobody spoken about her? They tried. What happened? They learned fear. From who? The same people Clara challenged. He lowered his voice. Is she dead? The woman's eyes filled with sadness. I don't know. You believe she's alive? I believe the truth is. Footsteps echoed nearby. An older farmer approached with an empty wagon. The woman called out, Do you remember Clara Ashe? The farmer froze. His face turned pale. He climbed onto his wagon without speaking. She called. Again, tell him what happened. The old farmer snapped the reins and hurried away. The cowboy watched in disbelief. He wouldn't even answer. He answered with silence. Exactly. Before noon, the cowboy rode into town. Outside the general store, he found an elderly widow sweeping the porch. Ma'am, she looked up. Morning. Can I ask something? If it's quick. Do you remember Clara Ashe? The broom slipped from her hands. She bent slowly, picked it up and whispered, Don't say that name here. Why? Because some people still listen. Who? She looked across the empty street. Then she walked inside and locked the door. The cowboy stood alone. No ghost had chased him. No gun had been raised. Yet the silence following. Clara Ashe's name felt heavier than any threat he had ever faced. For the first time in his life, he understood that fear did not always shout. Sometimes it survived by saying nothing at all. The widow waited until the last curtain inside the general store stopped moving. She stepped away from the berry bushes and looked toward the narrow trail disappearing into the trees. Come with me. Where? Somewhere your father hoped you would never find. The cowboy hesitated. Is it far? Far enough to stay hidden. She started walking without waiting for him. He tied his horse to a low branch and followed her into the thick brush. Branches scraped against his coat. Fallen leaves covered the old path. It looked as though nobody had walked there for years. You come here often? When memory asks me to. You always speak like that, because plain words frighten people. They frighten me. They should. The trail narrowed until broken. Stones appeared between patches of tall grass. Rusted iron fencing leaned sideways beneath climbing vines. Small wooden markers had rotted into the earth. The place felt forgotten long before either of them arrived. What is this? The first cemetery in the valley. I never knew it existed. That was the plan. He slowly walked between the graves. Many names had disappeared beneath cracked stone. Others had been worn away by rain and time. Wildflowers grew where families had once stood. Silence rested over everything. Nobody visits. Not anymore. Why? Because forgotten places ask difficult questions. He stopped before a larger headstone wrapped in thick vines. The woman gently pulled the vines away. A single name appeared. Clara Ash. He stared at it. So she really died. The woman quietly shook her head. No. He looked at her. Then why is there a grave? Because someone wanted the valley to stop looking. He frowned. That doesn't make sense. It made perfect sense to powerful men. You mean they buried an empty grave? They buried a story. He knelt beside the stone. There's no body. There never was. How do you know? I stood here the day they closed the ground. You saw it? I watched them lower an empty coffin. His breath caught. Who was there? The sheriff. My grandfather. She nodded. The judge. Anyone else? The richest families in the valley. My father. He was still a boy. He touched the cold stone. So everyone believed she was dead. They were told she was, and nobody questioned it. Those who questioned it disappeared from meetings, lost work, or learned to stay silent. He rose slowly. Why would they do that? Because a woman who cannot be found cannot testify. The words echoed inside him. What had Clara discovered? The widow looked toward the abandoned well beyond the trees. Land records. Is that all? No. What else? Names. Whose names? The men who stole more than land. Before he could answer, she suddenly raised her hand. Listen. He held his breath. Somewhere behind the trees, a branch snapped. He turned quickly. Who's there? No answer came. He stepped toward the sound. Show yourself. Only silence answered. The widow crouched beside the muddy ground. Don't chase. Why not? Look. Fresh boot prints crossed the soft earth. Beside the cemetery fence, the cowboy knelt beside them. They're new. Very. They weren't ours? No, he measured them against his own. They're larger and deeper. Someone stood here. They watched us. His heartbeat quickened. How long? Long enough. He looked into the trees again. I didn't hear anyone leave. That doesn't mean they weren't here. He followed the footprints until they vanished. Beneath hard ground, they disappear. They knew where to walk. You've seen these before? She nodded once. Twice this month. You never told anyone? Who would believe an old woman gathering berries? He clenched his jaw. This isn't history. Anymore. No, this is happening. Now, yes. Someone still protects the lie, and someone fears the truth. He looked back. Toward Clara Ash's empty grave. The cracked headstone no longer seemed forgotten. It felt guarded as they left the cemetery. He glanced over his shoulder one last time. The wind moved through the vines. Nothing else moved, yet he could not escape. The feeling that unseen eyes followed every step they took back toward the hidden trail. When they finally reached the edge of the woods, the cowboy understood something he had refused to believe only yesterday. The mystery surrounding Clara Ash had survived far beyond her disappearance. Someone was still protecting it. Someone was still watching, and now someone was watching him. The cowboy and the older woman had barely reached the broken entrance to the hidden cemetery when the sound of wagon wheels rolled across the quiet woods. A sheriff's wagon stopped across the narrow trail, blocking the only clear way out. The sheriff climbed down slowly, brushed dust from his coat, and rested one hand on his belt. His face showed no anger, but his eyes watched both of them without blinking. You've wandered far enough. The cowboy frowned. We're only leaving. Then leave. The older woman folded her arms. You came quickly. I patrol these woods. You haven't patrolled them in years. The sheriff ignored her. He looked at the cowboy instead. You shouldn't be here. Why? This cemetery is closed. By whose order? County order. When? Years ago. The cowboy glanced behind him. I've lived here all my life. So have I. I never heard about this place. You weren't supposed to. The answer came too quickly. The cowboy noticed it, so it was hidden. It was abandoned. That's different. The sheriff's jaw tightened. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. The older woman stepped forward. It matters because lies need locked gates. The sheriff sighed. Don't start this again. I never stopped. You enjoy stirring old pain. I enjoy buried truth. There is no truth here. She pointed toward the forgotten graves. Then why are you guarding them? I'm protecting private property. No. She shook her head. You're protecting powerful families. The sheriff looked away for a brief moment before answering. Watch your words. I have watched them for 30 years. You accuse people without proof. I had proof. What happened to it? You know exactly what happened. Silence settled over the trail. The cowboy studied the sheriff's face. For the first time, the lawman's calm expression seemed forced. He was choosing every word with care. Tell me about Clara Ashe. The sheriff answered without hesitation. She died. Where? We don't know. Then how do you know she died? The sheriff paused. It was assumed. The cowboy caught the mistake. So nobody proved it? No. Yet there's a grave. Yes. Without a body. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. Who told you that? Does it matter? It does. Why? The sheriff remained silent. The older woman smiled sadly. Because the story is slipping. The sheriff turned sharply toward her. You should have left this valley. It was my valley before it became theirs. Enough. No. She took another step. You wore a badge. I still do. Then act like it. I am. No. Her voice hardened. You protected rich men instead of protecting justice. The sheriff inhaled slowly. You don't understand what happened. I understand perfectly. You never saw everything. I saw enough. You saw pieces. I saw mothers crying. The sheriff lowered his eyes. I couldn't change it. You never tried. I did. When? You wouldn't believe me. The cowboy stared at him. Make me believe. The sheriff looked from the woman to the cemetery and back again. His confidence was fading. The cowboy could see it. The rehearsed answers were running out. My father trusted you. He shouldn't have. The sheriff blinked. The word seemed to surprise even him. What does that mean? It means... He stopped speaking. What? It means nothing. No. The cowboy stepped closer. It means something. The sheriff climbed back onto his wagon. This conversation is over. You still haven't answered me. I don't owe you answers. You owe this valley answers. The older woman nodded. He finally understands. The sheriff picked up the reins. Before urging the horses forward, he looked directly at the cowboy. His voice became almost gentle. Listen carefully. The cowboy waited. Some graves should never be opened. The horses started moving. The wagon rolled away through the trees. Dust lingered in the quiet air long after the sheriff disappeared. The cowboy watched until the sound of the wheels faded completely. The older woman remained beside him. He wanted to frighten you. He almost did. She looked toward the hidden cemetery. What do you feel now? He thought about the empty grave. He thought about his father's fear. He thought about the fresh footprints and the sheriff's careful answers. Then he slowly shook his head. I don't feel afraid anymore. What do you feel? I think someone buried the truth before they buried Clara. The woman nodded. And now? He turned toward the forgotten graves one more time. Now I know the sheriff wasn't protecting the dead. He fixed his eyes on the trail where the wagon had vanished. He was protecting the living. The dust from the sheriff's wagon had barely settled when the older woman turned away from the cemetery gate. She did not watch the road. She walked toward the thick trees instead. The cowboy followed without speaking. The warning still echoed inside his mind, but it no longer sounded like protection. It sounded like fear. We're not finished. I know. Where are we going? To the place where silence was hidden. The well? Yes. The trail twisted through heavy brush until the old stone well appeared between crooked trees. Moss covered its cracked rim. Thick vines climbed over the rocks. The place felt untouched by time. I've ridden past these woods for years. You were never meant to stop. The cowboy stepped closer. It looks abandoned. It is. Then why bring me here? Because abandoned things still keep secrets. She knelt beside the base of the well. Help me. What am I looking for? A stone that doesn't belong. He crouched beside her. Together they searched around the old foundation. After several moments, his fingers touched a flat rock that shifted too easily. I found something. Lift it. He pulled the stone aside. A bundle wrapped in faded cloth rested beneath it. His heartbeat quickened. Someone hid this. I know. How long has it been here? Long enough. He carefully lifted the bundle into the light. The cloth nearly fell apart in his hands. What is it? Open it. He slowly untied the worn string. Inside lay dozens of weathered letters. Their edges had turned brown with age. The ink had faded but remained readable. Their letters. Their voices. He unfolded the first page. The handwriting was uneven. He read quietly. They took our pasture because my husband refused to sign. He looked up. Who wrote this? A widow. He continued reading. The sheriff said the law belonged to the men with money. His chest tightened. That can't be true. It was. He opened another letter. My daughters are afraid to gather berries because riders follow them. He swallowed. They wrote everything down. They had no other witness. Another page waited beneath it. The judge smiled while our home was taken. The cowboy looked at the woman. Why hide these? Because speaking aloud became dangerous. So they wrote instead. They hoped someone honest would find them. He unfolded another letter. His breathing slowed. At the bottom of the page, he noticed a familiar signature, his own family name. He froze. No. What did you find? He turned the page toward her. My grandfather's name. She nodded. I told you. He shook his head. There has to be another explanation. Read. His eyes returned to the page. Mr. Hale promised protection, then signed the papers that took our land. His hands trembled. This isn't possible. It happened. My grandfather built our ranch. He built it. She paused, but not alone. The cowboy reached for another letter. His father's surname appeared again, this time beside a list of families forced away from the valley. His voice became barely audible. My family knew. Yes. They kept everything. Yes. The berry field. The orchards. The western pasture. They all belonged to someone. She gently touched one of the letters. They belonged to voices. He stared at the pages spread across the old stone. Every name carried another story. Every story carried another wound. My father never told me. Maybe he was never told everything. Or maybe he refused to ask. The woman looked toward the berry field beyond the trees. You believed those bushes were valuable because they grew fruit. The cowboy slowly nodded. They're not. What are they? They're the last place these women returned before everything was taken. He lowered his eyes. They gathered berries together. They shared news. They comforted one another. They buried fear. He looked at the bundle again. So when you crossed my fence, she finished his sentence. I wasn't stealing. He closed his eyes. I accused you. You defended what you believed. I defended a lie. Silence settled around the old well. The letters rested between them like living witnesses. The cowboy no longer saw deeds, fences, or property lines. He saw mothers, widows, daughters, families erased from the valley, one signature at a time. He carefully wrapped the letters back inside the old cloth. What happens now? The older woman looked directly into his eyes. Now the burden belongs to someone whose name is written on both sides of this story. The cowboy held the bundle against his chest. For the first time, the weight he carried had nothing to do with land. It was the weight of a family name that had been built upon generations of stolen voices. The cowboy tightened the faded cloth around the bundle of letters and held it against his chest. The older woman looked toward the berry field beyond the trees. Before either of them spoke again, the sharp smell of smoke drifted through the morning air. He turned. A thin line of black smoke rose above the abandoned orchard. Then orange flames burst through the dry branches. The fire spread from tree to tree with frightening speed. No. The woman looked toward the burning hillside. They've started. They? The people who fear those letters. The cowboy grabbed the bundle. We have to stop it. You save the fire. And you? I'll protect the truth. He ran toward the orchard. By the time he reached the first row of trees, flames had already swallowed the old grass beneath them. Burning leaves floated through the air. Heat pushed against his face. He pulled off his coat and beat at the nearest flames. It isn't enough. The woman reached the edge of the well. Take the letters. No. They'll come here. They're already coming. The sound reached them first. Hooves. Fast. Several riders burst through the smoke. Their faces were hidden beneath dark cloth. The lead rider pointed toward the well. There. Another shouted. Burn everything. The cowboy stepped between them and the older woman. Leave. The riders laughed. Move. I'm not asking. One rider swung down from his horse. Hand over the bundle. No. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to this valley. The rider stepped closer. It belongs in ashes. The cowboy clenched his fists. You'll have to go through me. So be it. The first punch came without warning. The cowboy staggered but stayed on his feet. Another rider rushed forward. He shoved the man backward into the dirt. The horses screamed as sparks drifted around them. The older woman looked at the growing fire. Then she looked at the letters. Without another word, she ran back toward the old well. The cowboy shouted, Don't! She ignored him. Another masked rider saw her. Stop her! Two men chased after her. The cowboy tackled the nearest one before he reached the well. Both men crashed into the ground. The second rider kept running. The older woman reached the loose stone. She knelt and pulled another small cloth bundle from beneath it. The rider grabbed her shoulder. She refused to let go. Give it here. No. He pulled harder. She held tighter. The cloth ripped. Several letters scattered into the wind. The rider reached for them. She threw herself across the pages. No. He raised his boot. Before it struck, the cowboy reached him. He pulled the man away and drove him into the stone wall beside the well. The rider stumbled backward. The others looked toward the road. One shouted, We're out of time. Another answered, The fire's spreading. The lead rider glared at the cowboy. This isn't over. He climbed onto his horse. Within seconds, the riders disappeared into the thick smoke. The orchard continued burning. The cowboy grabbed a nearby bucket left beside an old rain barrel. Together, he and the older woman carried water again and again. They beat at the flames with wet blankets and broken branches. Hours seemed to pass. The fire slowly weakened. The first light of dawn climbed over the hills. Smoke still drifted above the blackened orchard, but the berry field remained standing. The old well remained untouched. The woman sank onto a fallen log, breathing heavily. The cowboy knelt beside the scattered letters. Most were dirty. Some edges had burned, but they still existed. He carefully gathered every page. We saved them. She nodded. Not all, but enough. He looked toward the burned orchard. They wanted to erase everything. They almost did. He wrapped the surviving letters inside fresh cloth torn from his own shirt. What happens now? She looked toward the brightening sky. Now people will see. They'll deny it. Some will. They'll call us liars. They already have. The cowboy stood slowly. His clothes smelled of smoke. His hands were black with ash. Yet the bundle beneath his arm felt heavier than ever, not because of its weight, because it carried proof. He turned toward the valley below. The ranch houses still stood. The courthouse still stood. The sheriff's office still stood. Nothing looked different. Yet everything had changed. The fire had failed. The truth had survived the night. And with the coming dawn, the fear that had ruled the valley for generations no longer belonged only to the forgotten women. For the first time, it belonged to those who had spent decades trying to bury them. The first light of dawn still rested over the valley as the cowboy and the older woman walked down the dusty road toward town. Smoke drifted behind them from the burned orchard. The bundle of surviving letters remained tucked beneath the cowboy's arm. Every step felt heavier than the last, yet neither of them slowed. They'll be waiting. Maybe. They may turn us away. They've turned away truth before. The church bell rang once across the empty streets. Store owners unlocked their doors. Children stopped playing when they saw the pair approaching. Neighbors looked through windows, then quietly pulled their curtains shut. The cowboy stopped in the center of the street. They already know. They always knew. They're afraid. They've practiced fear for years. He looked toward the church. Its doors were closed. I thought churches welcomed people. They welcome comfort. And truth? She gave him a tired smile. That depends on who is listening. The cowboy climbed onto the wooden platform outside the general store. He held up the bundle. I found these. Nobody answered. They belong to the women this valley forgot. Silence. He looked from face to face. I know you're watching. Still nothing. They deserve to be heard. A window closed. A shopkeeper walked away. Even the birds seemed quiet. The older woman stepped beside him. You don't owe me anything, her voice carried through the street. But you owe your daughter's honesty. The silence remained. Then the sound of slow footsteps echoed across the road. An elderly woman walked from a small house near the church. Her hands trembled. Her eyes never left the bundle. I remember. The cowboy looked at her. You knew Clara Ash? The old woman nodded. I knew her. No one moved. She stepped closer. I was supposed to speak years ago. What stopped you? My husband. She swallowed. He said we'd lose everything. The older woman gently reached for her hand. You already did. Tears filled the old woman's eyes. They took my sister's land. She pointed toward the letters. Her name is in there. The cowboy slowly unwrapped the cloth. He searched through the pages, then he found it. He quietly read the name aloud. The elderly woman covered her face. That's her. Another voice rose behind the crowd. So is my mother's. An old farmer stepped forward. My wife wrote one. A widow left the church steps. My daughter disappeared after asking questions. Another man removed his hat. My father knew. A woman carrying water lowered her bucket. I stayed silent. More people gathered. One after another, they stepped into the street. No one shouted. No one argued. They simply spoke. I remember. I saw them. My brother warned me. My mother cried every harvest. We were told never to ask. The cowboy looked around in disbelief. The empty street was no longer empty. It was filled with voices waiting decades to be heard. A wagon rolled slowly toward the crowd. The sheriff climbed down. Nobody moved aside. He looked at the people surrounding him. Then he looked at the bundle of letters. His shoulders sank. It's over. The cowboy faced him. Tell them. The sheriff closed his eyes. For several moments he said nothing. Then he finally spoke. We were threatened. The crowd remained silent. The wealthiest ranch families controlled the judges. He looked toward the courthouse. They controlled elections. He looked toward the church. They controlled donations. His voice weakened. And they controlled fear. The older woman stepped closer. You helped them. Yes. You buried the truth. I did. You watched innocent families suffer. His head lowered. I told myself I was protecting peace. You protected power. I know. The cowboy stared at the broken man standing before the town. The badge on the sheriff's coat suddenly looked smaller than before. No badge could carry the weight of so many years of silence. Around him, neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder. Some cried openly, some held hands, some simply nodded, as forgotten memories finally became spoken truth. The cowboy looked at the bundle beneath his arm, then at the people surrounding him. For the first time since entering the berry field, he saw something stronger than fear. He saw ordinary people finding the courage to stand together, and once they began speaking, the silence that had ruled the valley for generations could no longer return. The sheriff's final confession settled over the crowd like the end of a long storm. No one spoke for several moments. The people simply looked at one another, carrying the weight of truths that had waited decades to be heard. The cowboy stood in the center of the street with the bundle of letters in his hands. He looked at the older woman, then toward the road leading back to the berry field. "We're going back." She nodded. "It's time." The crowd followed them without being asked. Old farmers walked beside widows. Children held their mothers' hands. The sheriff came too, leaving his wagon behind. No one led the procession. No one needed to. When they reached the berry field, the morning sun rested across the bushes. The fire had blackened the nearby orchard, but the berries still shone beneath fresh leaves. The old well stood quietly beyond the trees, watching over the valley as it always had. The cowboy stepped through the open gate. He turned toward the people. "My family called this our land." His voice remained steady. I believed them. He looked at the older woman. I was wrong. Nobody interrupted. He slowly removed the ranch keys from his pocket. My grandfather signed papers. He raised the keys. My father protected those papers. He lowered them into the older woman's hands. But paper cannot erase truth. She looked down at the keys. "I don't need these. I know. They never belonged to me. They belong to all of you." He faced the gathered families. "I cannot undo what happened." A quiet voice answered, "No." The elderly woman who had spoken in town stepped forward. "But you can choose what happens next." The cowboy nodded. "I do." He took a deep breath. "From this day forward, this berry field belongs to the descendants of every woman who cared for it before it was taken." The crowd remained silent for only a heartbeat. Then tears appeared. An old farmer removed his hat. A young mother hugged her daughter. The widow covered her mouth. The sheriff quietly lowered his badge into his pocket. The cowboy looked toward him. "What will you do now?" The sheriff answered without hesitation. "I'll tell everything I should have told years ago." The cowboy nodded once. "Then start today." "I will." The older woman walked slowly toward the berry bushes. Nobody stopped her. Nobody questioned her. She bent down and picked the first handful of berries. Her fingers moved gently across the branches. She smiled for the first time. The cowboy watched quietly. "You waited a long time." "I did." "Was it worth it?" She looked at the basket resting against her arm. "Ask the women standing behind you." He turned. Several daughters and granddaughters had stepped into the field. Some laughed softly. Others wiped tears from their faces. One little girl picked a single berry and placed it into her grandmother's hand. The older woman filled her basket slowly. No one hurried her. No fence stood between her and the bushes anymore. When the basket was finally full, she carried it toward the old well. She rested one hand against its weathered stone. The cowboy joined her. "I thought land was something people owned." She smiled gently. "Many people do." "I understand now." "What do you understand?" He looked across the quiet valley. "You can own land on paper." She nodded. "But you cannot own memory." "No." "You cannot own dignity." "No." "And you cannot bury truth forever." The older woman looked into the basket filled with dark berries. "Truth waits." She lifted the basket. "Sometimes it waits longer than people." The cowboy watched as she started walking down the old path. She did not look back. She no longer needed permission. She no longer walked like a stranger crossing forbidden ground. She walked like someone returning home. The people remained together beside the berry field until she disappeared beyond the trees. No voice called after her. No fear followed her footsteps. The wind moved gently through the branches. The old well stood in quiet silence. This time the silence no longer carried secrets. It carried peace. The cowboy looked across the valley one final time. The fences still stood. The ranch house still stood. The hills had not changed. Yet everything felt different. The land had finally remembered its true keepers. The forgotten women had finally been heard, and the last basket of berries was no longer gathered in sorrow, but in dignity, welcome, and hope, ending the long silence that had haunted the valley for generations.